I've said to people for years, right? They're sort of the American Idol of payments. It's like everybody can come audition. If you can hold any kind of tune, then we'll get you in front of the camera and then you can look stupid and then we'll gauge you to be not good enough. Those that only get to a certain, that 10, 20, maybe 30K a month, they're still not really problem aware, I've found. It's only when they get to be like 50, 60, 70, 100 plus a month that they're like, yep, I need to fix a few things here to make sure my baseline is good, right? Because you can't scale complexity and they're trying to scale complexity, right? That's just what I found to be true of most folks. If you think about that inverted triangle and they've got the singular point of failure, which is a single bank at the bottom, then the wind can blow from any direction and you're toast. Yeah. If you got to do the boring stuff and you got to do the boring stuff well. So for me, that's infrastructure. That's payment infrastructure, period. Stripe is not payment infrastructure. Stripe is payment technology.
Josh, the only time I see you is when someone has a problem. You realize like you're like the guy where all of a sudden there's a problem and you're like the avenging dude. You come in and like, save the day. You're like the damsel in distress. Someone Stripe account it down.
Yeah, like the doctor fixer for the mafia, right? Like, hey, my guy got shot up, or hey, my guy's in legal trouble.
Yeah. So it's funny because I think being a go-to person like is becoming your thing in a way. Like people are starting to, a year ago or 2 years ago, there would be all these other names, but now it's like you kind of get the first dibs on a lot of conversations around like if my merchant services are down, I'll call, 1-800-MOON or whatever,
Yeah.
So, and have you seen a change in how things have now operated for you? Because this is different than it was a few years ago.
That's a really good question. I do think there is a change. I think a lot of it has come from the fact that High Level, and I'm not throwing them under the bus in any way, shape, or form, but High Level as a marketplace for us has been, it's been a pretty big sandbox, but they made it so challenging to integrate with, right? That most of the people that were trying to integrate just sort of walked away. You still have people that are like, hey, I can totally help. And they immediately jump into some Facebook comment with a pitch. But most of the people that we've paid attention to, yeah, they just have sort of been like, it's not really worth our time to try and wrangle this beast. And we've just stuck with it. So we tend to see more and more activity these days, which we're grateful for. But yeah, I think there's been a change. I think there's a secondary change, but we can talk about that later.
Yeah. To me, I think what's happening, and I do think part of it is the steamrolling of a million people into High Level who have got no clue what they're doing and literally just go and spin up something and then get in trouble. I think the velocity, obviously, as they're trying to go public, or at least attempting to go public, or in the mode of trying to build a big, massive customer list, they've kind of like not spent the time to, I think, put the effort towards and we've talked about this before, about the real business of the business.
You're talking about Stripe, right?
Well, I'm talking about just that the people who are going into this business and into High Level, there's so many people flooding into this, into the agency world, but they don't know anything about business. That's what I really, it's not even Stripe. It's like, there's no end. Like it's a game of like, okay, yeah, I can go build me an agency. Great. Yeah. But you don't even have an idea on how to run like a general spreadsheet for your business. Like you haven't even started with that yet. Like there's so much. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think it's beyond just the merchant gateway. It's like an education problem.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's an education problem. So I've seen that honestly for the last 5 years. So in our world, right, we're collecting a ton of information about a business, right? Who you are, what you do, what you sell, how you sell it, how much of it you sell, right? How you fulfill it. And when you ask those questions of people, like really ask them, most of them don't know. And so they're just sixes and sevens, if that makes sense. And it's just, and I'm not using that as like, I love that, by the way. I love the kids. They're like, no, it's a totally new thing. No, it's not. People have been saying sixes and sevens or half a dozen one and six of the other, right? Anyways, that is definitely true. There is this constant push of just create one digital product and you can sell it and you can make $1 million a year. And that's the guru, right? And now people are getting into the anti-guru phase. Like, stop listening to those guys. And even some really popular people out there who are well-intentioned are like, no, you can do it with this bot and that bot and the other bot, and they're getting in trouble. And it's really crazy if you think about it. And I would even actually throw Stripe in that same bucket. I've said to people for years, right? They're sort of the American Idol of payments. It's like everybody can come audition. If you can hold any kind of tune, then we'll get you in front of the camera and then you can look stupid and then we'll gauge you to be not good enough, right? And then eventually they've only built like 2 real stars out of the whole thing. You know what I mean? And so you're like, oh, the idea behind American Idol is for American Idol as an entertainment company to make a product and sell their product. It's not really to brand somebody a singer and give them a contract, right? So
100%. Yeah, I mean, that's right, spot on.
So, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like come and audition, like figure it out. Everybody that's an entrepreneur is figuring it out at some level, right? But a lot of them just stick their head in the sand and they're like, no, this is the way it works. Or my favorite lately is, no, that's just the cost of doing business. Just stop with the garbage. Like, everything's the cost of doing business.
Well, and this brings up a good point, because the journey that people are going through, right? You could stub your toe real bad.
Yeah.
And I think, look, I learned it the worst way possible when I was very, very deep into this and came running to you to solve a very big problem.
Yeah.
That was a massive issue as I was going through almost the sale of a company. And of course, I think there is a level of like misunderstanding of certain aspects of the business that people don't really come to fruition until they start having problems, right? So it's almost like people need to be solution aware.
Yeah.
And I know we use that term loosely in our sales language, but it's almost like that's a big problem with I think the high level story, which is that everybody's sold.
Yeah.
Chase used to call it something, sold the dream or something like that. But the real truth is that the high level, and especially because your interface into that is, it is a piece of a larger whole. But the real thing is like people just don't know the scale of the challenges that are surrounding, from a business perspective, all the things that need to be adapted as people grow into entrepreneurship in their journey.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost as if, I think you probably come into contact with a lot of these people where it's like, dude, like, forget about this. You have like all these other things that you need to like get your ducks in a row. Right?
Yeah. I actually think that's problem aware, right? They don't know that they have a problem. That's a lot of what I talk to people about. It's that head in the sand approach, right? Oh, somebody told me I could build a product and sell it. Okay. So let's say 50% of them actually figure out how to do that. They can actually start driving leads and sales, but they're not problem aware of what the infrastructure looks like, what you're saying, right? The solution piece. They're not aware of the American Idol analogy that we just talked about. So that is a problem that is so deep and so undermining to their long-term success that they don't even bother to look for a solution. So then they're not solution aware. The second it smacks them in the face, like it smacked you in the face, is then like, oh, I got a real problem here, and now I got to go find the solution. So I actually think it's one step before. I think they're not problem aware of what's really happening. And listen, if we're being honest, that's an entrepreneur in general, right? It's sort of like ready, fire, aim. And that's how we operate. And then those that really make it big have then figured out the infrastructure piece long-term. Those that only get to a certain, that 10, 20, maybe 30K a month, They're still not really problem aware, I've found. It's only when they get to be like 50, 60, 70, 100 plus a month that they're like, yep, I need to fix a few things here to make sure my baseline is good, right? Because you can't scale complexity, and they're trying to scale complexity, right? That's just what I found to be true of most folks. It's the old cliche, right? Everybody that I talk to that is in the 10, 20, 30 range, that their heads cut off, they're running around, they're trying to figure things out. They're hearing from guys like me, like, I don't even know if I got a problem yet because I've never seen it. And I'm like, you got a real problem. You just haven't seen it yet. And then I get to those folks that are doing 100K a month. They've got a team member or two that are running the side of the business that I help with. Then they're talking to other, great people out there, fractional CFOs who are like, look, you're not doing as good as you think you are, or right. And so it gets to this point of like I said, the old cliche is true. You start running into 100K a month folks, and they definitely know what's going on. Now they're definitely problem aware, but they're problem aware at a different level. They're going, yeah, that cost is excessive. I need to be more efficient there. And I'm starting to see more and more of those folks, if that makes sense. It's refreshing, if I'm being honest. It's obviously fun to help everybody, but yeah.
Who do you see as successful beyond forget about the money part. Let's just talk about who do you see as being so you see a panoply of different agencies, businesses. Who do you see as being successful? Because you could watch the numbers, obviously. Wow, these guys are going nuts. Who's really being successful in this? What are the outliers? Who's the dude who's like, wow, these guys are growing like a weed? What happened? Do you see those guys? Because there must be some interpretive data you get that you go, okay, this guy must be doing something really good, or this gal.
Yeah, it's those folks that are, beyond 50 to 100K a month. They tend to be actually a little bit more quiet, if that makes sense, right? Their heads down, they're just doing the work, and they figured out how to do the work, and they figured out how to grow. I wouldn't say they're like exponential growth. They're not going from 100 to 200, a quarter, right? But they're going from 100 to 115 to 130. They figured out that steady path upwards. And the piece that sticks out to me is they're quiet. They're quiet about their business because they just go execute it. If we're talking about the community in general, the high level community, those that are really active in the Facebook group, the louder they are, the more they tend to be chaotic, right? And I think some of that's just that they're figuring stuff out. They're working diligently to figure it out. And they haven't made that big jump from maybe 50 to 100. When they do, they seem to level out a bit on, okay, this is how this machine works, right? And we hear, again, cliches. Once you get to that machine level, you're operating that machine. You get the monotony of it, but you just keep going because you know it produces results, right? It's not this, I got to be everything to everybody all the time. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I've already been through that journey. Again, getting up to 250 or whatever, some enormous number. But what I was curious about, do you have a specific example of someone that you see that's doing an edge case? Someone who's really doing it? Is there a particular industry, or is it a particular thing? Is there anything you could say that's remarkable?
No. Actually, what's really remarkable that I've noticed is those folks that have just done what Sean has said in high level, which is get good at the basics. And then they have filtered out in their niche, right? So there are folks, I'll give you an example. We have a client that's in the real estate mortgage space, but then they figured out the mortgage space was a bit better than the real estate space, even though the two are very parallel, right? And they started going they came to us, I think, at 30 or 40,000, and now they're doing 150 a month. Very successful, but cut out the excess and got good at the pieces that they were really good at, right? And you see this in books like 10x is greater than 2x, and buy back your time, all these kinds of books where they're like, look, you got to get real good add a couple of things, and then literally strip out everything else. Yeah. So that's the remarkable piece that I've seen. And I think, to their credit, High Level is very similar, even though they have a lot of different channels that they can help people with. They've still been good at pretty much the basic, which is the SaaS piece. And they stripped out all the other stuff, if that makes sense. At least that's how I've seen it.
I think that that's a great segue into talking about High Level. It's funny. I had a conversation with another potential client, or they're probably going to be a client of mine, but they're like, yeah, well, we played around. We didn't like High Level. We went off and we want to do, some other CRM, whatever. And I'm like, okay, like, interesting. Like, I'm just curious because we haven't really talked about outside of High Level, like what goes on.
Sure.
Like, do you see people coming from other angles besides High Level to you?
Yeah.
And what feeling in the market that what they're doing, is it better, worse, or indifferent? Because it's almost like blinders are on all these people because we're so in this community, right? And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious because, I haven't had a lot of conversations outside of this because we're usually dictating what happens. We're like, no, you're getting High Level and shut up and sit down in your chair.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, I've got a client like, no, we're not. We don't like that. We want to do this. And I'm like, okay, like, whatever, do whatever you want, because I'm not involved in that piece of their business. But curious on what you think on the other side of the world that's happening.
So for me, for my world and my industry, yeah, we're starting to get interest in very large organizations. Well, large to us, right? 15 million a year, 35 million a year. We're starting to have conversations with actually industry technology that's taking a look at us. I had a great conversation with a guy who's been in payments since 1984. So what is that? It's like 40 some years, right? 42 years. Who has built some legacy software in payments that still exists in big banks. And we showed him what we had, and he was like, this is fantastic. And so it made me sort of go internally, like, do I even know what I have? Sometimes that happens, right? You can find yourself in a position like, do we really know what we have here? Not to blow smoke or brown nose or anything, right? But if you look at Sean, Varun, and Robin, did they really know what they had in the beginning? I think they were just being diligent and trying to serve a marketplace very, very well. And clearly they've done that. But did they, do you really know, right? Like, I'll say it this way. We my wife and I went out for Valentine's Day. We went and saw Pretty in Pink. That came out 40 years ago. Before they ran the film, which we've seen hundreds of times, right? Before they ran the film, they had the director on talking about, parts of the film and how they made it, right? And he's like, look, when you're making a movie, you don't know if it's going to be a big movie or if it's going to be a cult classic or whatever. And that movie ended up being a cult classic, right? From the 80s, a coming of age. John Hughes was very much that way as a director. And so if you think about High Level in those sort of same terms, I think as everybody internally to High Level calls them SVR, right? Did they really know it was going to get to this point? Maybe they had dreams of it. Those guys are all smart guys, but did they know? So my point is, yeah, I'm seeing stuff outside of High Level. We're starting to have some real big conversations with industry players, banks, like full on, like massive banking institutions about what we're doing. I mean, it's really exciting. Do I know what I have? Yeah, I know what we can do. I still don't know the future, right? I just can see the writing as to how this impacts people that are in the industry. We started out making a tool for folks in High Level who are having trouble with Stripe and who are still having trouble. and now
I think that goes away.
Yeah, it's not that it goes away, right? So I still get multiple times a week, somebody's like, hey, I got booted. Hey, I'm in trouble. Hey, my money's frozen. But that's beside the point. My answer to your question is, yeah, we're definitely seeing outside of, High Level for sure.
So you kind of had some ups and downs with this business. And I remember when we met 2 years ago at one of the events that high level threw on, we were talking about this, like, how do you penetrate? How do you penetrate? How do you penetrate? And I think now it's sort of like, have you found some things that have helped you grow that maybe you could say that are unique to because I can remember there was, you were just like, I've got to get this going, I've got to get this going. And then all of a sudden it's sort of like become, I think, more resonant as you've developed, obviously, the
Sure.
product. But is there a thing that you could spot on that helped you?
I think it's going to sound cliche, and I know I've said that word a lot in this conversation. I think it's being relentless to find the right solution. Look, I'm just going to be frank. The people that I've watched come into payments in high level are doing the same thing that everybody else has always done. I can get you a cheaper rate. Now, I'm less expensive. I'm not going to hide behind the fact that I do something similar, but I do it so differently that it tends to shock people when it works. But the folks that I've seen come in are what the industry has always done. Oh, I can do this and I can save you 5 basis points or 10 basis, blah, blah. It's the same song and dance, which means the end customer is literally chasing a rate that they can never beat. You can never beat interchange unless you do what we do. And so as I've gone through this, it's just been this relentless pursuit to make it a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And one of the things that I think we do better than anybody else is that foundational approach, right? So I actually put a video out a little while ago that sort of shows a pyramid, right? Almost like Maslow's hierarchy. So you've got the pyramid the way that we do it, and the banks are at the bottom of this pyramid, which gives you like true foundation, right? Because we can stack up banks or we can move banks and all this kind of stuff. If you look at Stripe as an example, PayPal is the same and Square is very much the same. They have this inverted pyramid where there's a singular bank at the bottom. So if you look at the pyramid from our point of view, and you've got banks at the bottom and you've got technology and strategy and support, right, are the sort of 4 layers that I put together, then the wind can blow from either direction and you still have a very stable structure, right? And the wind is chargebacks or it's algorithm changes or it's terms of service or whatever, right? Figure out which way that wind's blowing. If you think about that inverted triangle and they've got the singular point of failure, which is a single bank at the bottom, then the wind can blow from any direction and you're toast. And so we've looked at relentlessly, how do we make that bottom layer the most robust it can ever be? And then from there, how do we now match the speed of somebody like a Stripe or a PayPal? Because that's one of the things that they do very, very well. Yep. Their technology is obviously groundbreaking and it's amazing. But I talk about in that video, it doesn't matter how good your technology or how good your strategy is if this bottom layer always fails you. It just doesn't. So that's what we've taken to heart. What I've taken to heart is, how do I make that layer better and better? How do I make it broader and broader, right? So this year we're looking global so that anybody in high level can be successful with that piece, and then anybody outside of it as well. So it's a wholesale approach to your stability, period. And to be fair, that's what, Sean, Varun, and Robin talked about as well, is as an agency, you had that churn, right? You were always competing against the next guy who could get a better CPA and a better logo and a better website, all this stuff, right? But you add SaaS to it and it reduces churn dramatically. Well, we're doing the same thing under the payments module, really. I mean, that's what's been our focus.
But that's something that's like for your average layman. Like, I know what you're talking about because
Sure.
I realized right away what happened, and I go, okay, and that routing, right, which is really what it is at the end of the day. It's tough to explain that to somebody.
It is
like they don't know. Like, it's almost like trying to say, well, this cake is made of really good sugar. Not the regular sugar you get in the store, but a really good sugar. And someone's like, it tastes fine. Leave me alone.
Yeah.
And I think that's like, I think maybe it's the beating of the drum um, to prove. Remember, we talked about this before, which is being problem aware.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's like, it's hard to, I think it's hard to let people know like that the ingredient that's really the special sauce that you sort of created that now, and again, I know the timing factor and all that plays into that because that's now managing that expectation. But I think there's as we talked about, like outside of high level, I'm sure that this is ubiquitous. I mean, it seems like to me, not having partnership routing, it could be anywhere. So it's like, I see how that would be important for a lot of things.
Yeah, yeah, that's very true. And you're right. It is hard to convey to somebody industry jargon, period, right? It's hard to convey to somebody that I hesitate to use the term because I've lost friends and family to cancer. But you have a cancer inside of your business when you have a singular fail point in the very thing that drives your business forward, which is cash flow, right? So I've always looked at it in terms of how, right? And if you look at the book Breakthrough Marketing, Gene Schwartz, right? Most marketers are very familiar with that book. And he talks very clearly, like your job is not to educate the planet, right? Your job is to start solving problems. And then you have that problem solution, right? All that kind of stuff that comes in place. And I'm not counteracting, this guy is obviously a genius. But the reality is in the world that I'm in, people need to know that infrastructure is broken. And I sound like a broken record when I talk about it. That's just the world that I live in. If you trust a technology that has no real foundation for the very, very piece that you need, then it doesn't matter what I tell you. If you're not going to understand it, if you're not going to take the time to look into it, if you're not going to take the time to fix it, then I can't help you until you do run into a real challenge, right? And that's not to say people don't want real solutions. It's to say that it's just not top of mind for them. They're not problem aware until the problem presents itself in such a way that they're like, crap, I got to take care of this. Does that make sense?
It does. I think I want to use a better analogy for my own purposes because I think it would maybe help people feel better about how instead of your cancer diagnosis.
Yeah.
When you were in high school, right? Or maybe college, there was no way in the world you would be only dating one girl. Why? Because you knew sooner or later, either it was going to go bad, it was going to go sour,
Yeah.
or you were going to screw up, or even worse, she was going to screw up. And so if you have 3 or 4 dating arrangements, you always have a partner. And so it's almost like you got to think of it as sort of like there has to be a way to have a good time still and not to be concerned.
Yeah.
And so I like that better than the cancer diagnosis. But look, we've got a couple minutes here. I want to wrap this up. So we talked about the hero story, how you've become a hero to a lot of people, especially in the high level community. We talked about businesses being problem aware, right? Which is incredibly important because you know what,
Sure.
There's a lot of emptiness out there when it comes to entrepreneurs' brains.
Yeah.
They start this stuff, especially at the velocity that high levels turning them out. So we talked about the out of network or out of high level environment that's out there that, beyond what we do, there are so many different layers to success. What do you think will define your next year or two in the business? Where do you think this is going to go with because we've got AI, we've got like all these things happening.
Yeah.
And, as I was saying this morning, we were trying to put up some Facebook ads and I'm like, why can't just we say, build me some Facebook ads and be done with it, right? But But the truth is that we've got a lot of Flintstone level businesses out there to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big, to me, I'm like, we still have a lot of capturing to do. And it's not going to like solve, AI doesn't solve problems today that are very obvious to you and I. But what do you think? Look at your business. Like, where do you think you're heading in the year? Because you said that, like, hey, you've kind of gotten better at developing and working. And what do you see in a year or two for you?
Exponential growth. This year will be a very large, exponentially good growth. I said that sentence was terrible. This year will be exponentially better than all years combined. There's so much that we have getting released in the next 30 to 60 days. And some of it AI related, actually, in payments, that's going to really open the floodgates. But it's also these connections that we're making with these larger industry players. So we're working on, and this is all sort of surface level at the moment, but we're working on a meeting with an industry leader that did 200 billion last year, that is eager to take a look at our technology, and they've been around for 20 years. So that's, an exponential piece. We had a conversation last week with a very large, what we call sponsor banks. They're actually what's called an ISO, and then they have multiple sponsor banks that feed into them. But they're very excited about what we're doing. So it's going to be exponentially larger this year than it has been in years combined. And that's exciting. It's also like, man, we got a lot of work to do, but we're there. This year is going to be big. Yeah, we're excited in a lot of ways.
Well, and I think it's important. And to dovetail on that last thing, do you have any advice for anybody out there who's listening to this and has spent their time understanding that they're now problem aware? Obviously, it's not about pitching. I'm just saying, like, is there any advice you would have, to solve sort of like education wise? And I think that's my biggest concern about this entire industry, is that I talk to a lot of agencies. I don't know. It seems like there's too much dream and not enough like rubber on the road.
Yeah. No, it's an excellent point, but and I don't follow this guy. I just have seen some of the things that he said. And I don't think he's saying anything different than somebody else successful would say. But Hormozy is very popular for saying, right, like, you just got to do the boring stuff. Again, he's not the only person that says that. But if you got to do the boring stuff, and you got to do the boring stuff well. So for me, that's infrastructure. That's payment infrastructure, period. Stripe is not payment infrastructure. Stripe is payment technology. That's what they are. So I'll say my typical line: I'm not a Stripe hater in any way, shape, or form. Clearly their technology is good technology, but it doesn't make a freaking difference if you're not problem aware that they could cut you off tomorrow and your cash flow is gone. So my advice to people is, look at the problem before it becomes a problem. And that's hard for people to do. I remember early on in the business, I noticed a problem, and this is just me being vulnerable. I noticed a large problem, and I didn't do a dang thing about it, and I paid a big price. Now, it has nothing to do with our technology or how we support our clients. It had everything to do with our revenue. And I saw a problem coming, and I was like, this is going to be a big problem. You should take care of it. And then I didn't take care of it. And so if somebody could learn from that, that's really what we do. We help people take care of problems before they become a problem and grow from there. Like, it shouldn't be that hard to do what we're telling people to do. They just refuse to do it. Like, that's the reality. You're such a classic example. You didn't know until you knew, right?
Yeah.
That's right. Just, it is what it is. So that's why I'm constantly putting out content that talks about the problem. This is why Progressive has the same commercial line, which gets me, because, right, when you're becoming your parent, you're not. So it's just this constant, like, I'm just trying to get people to pay attention to the messaging and go from noise to solution. That's it. That's what I'm doing.
Date more girls.
It's fun when you brought that up. I had a very good, we'll call him a spiritual leader, if you will, in our church, and it happened to be the wife of this spiritual leader. And she's like, "How many pots do you have on the stove?" And I was like, "What the heck are you talking about?" She's like, "How many girls are you dating?" I was like, "I don't know, one." She's like, "You need more pots on the stove, and then you just wait for one to boil." Oh, got it. Yeah, date more girls.
We'll leave it at that. All right, thanks, Josh.